Nice to see you back. If you can remember from our previous lecture where we discussed about creating roles in Primavera P6, and you know that the roles are skill sets or the job titles of the people working on the projects. Now, in this lecture, we will focus on the procedure to create the resources in the Primavera P6. I guess you have idea and you know already from our previous discussion that resources means the people and the equipment that are used to perform work on all the activities in a certain project. There are three types of resources we have normally in our projects, and these resources types are labor, non-labor, and material resources. Now, the labor resources are human beings or people that actually perform work on project activities. The examples of labor resources can be engineers, project managers, architects, and technicians, etc. Now, if we look at the non-labor resources, so these can be referred to the equipment used during work on the activities in a certain project. I mean, non-labor resources can be cranes, excavators, forklifters, and computers, etc. The material resources, we can define these as the supplies in the project. I mean, material resources are consumable items, or we may say that material resources are the raw materials that is required to work on a certain project activity. Now, the key point to remember here that the labor or non-labor resources are mostly recorded in hours. I mean, these are time-based only, while on the other hand, the material resources are recorded in cost per unit in the Primavera P6. Please also notice that we can always share the resources across other projects in the organization if needed. And we can create resources like a hierarchy, and which also depends on our organization structure type. I mean, it depends on your own resource structure and the way you want according to your organization setup type. And in the Primavera P6, you can create as many resources as needed for your project. By the way, if required, you can build your project schedule without assigning resources to your project activities, which is called unresourced schedule. But if you plan to build your schedule like an unresourced schedule, then this way you won't be able to estimate cost and budget your project activities as needed. So that means we have to assign resources first, and after we assign roles, and then we will enter expenses to a certain project activity to estimate cost for that particular activity. So remember that first we need to assign resources, I mean labor or non-labor or material resources to the activities in the project. And then, of course, we assign roles to the labor resources. And after we enter expenses, and all this will lead us to the budgeted total cost. I mean, all this will help us to calculate the total budgeted cost for our project. And this way, we will understand that after assigning roles, how all these roles affect the cost of a certain activity in a project. Now, in this particular lecture, we will discuss the procedure to create the resources only. And please note that we will learn about assigning the resources, expenses, and budgeted total cost. All these topics will be discussed in our next lessons in the course. Okay, so since we have created the roles for our project already in our previous discussion, and you already know that we can create the roles by using the enterprise menu from the top, and can click on roles options from here. Now it will open up the roles window in front of us, and you can see here the roles, the 5 roles we have created for our project under the header called ARBA Project Management. We can always use the add and delete button on the right side in the roles window to add or delete the roles as needed. Okay, so in our present lesson, since we are going to learn and discuss the procedure to create the resources for our project, there are multiple ways by using which we can open up the resources window and Firstly, the resources window can be accessed by using the resources icon in the enterprise toolbar on the left side. If I click on this icon, you see the resources window is opened in front of us. And another way is we can use the enterprise menu from the top and click on the resources option here to access the same window. You see nothing happens once we clicked on resources under the enterprise menu because our resources window was displaying there already. Now again, in order to add the resources, we can use the multiple methods. In the edit toolbar from the right, you have the plus-like icon here. We can use the add icon to add the resources in the resources window. Secondly, we can right-click anywhere in the resources window and select the add options from here. Now, the third option that we can use to add the resources in the resources dictionary, that is, we can press the insert key from our keyboard to add the resources to the Oracle Primavera P6 resources database. Now, if you come across a situation like, for example, if you click on resources icon from the enterprise toolbar from the left side and your resources window is not showing any resources, I mean it is completely blank, then you don't need to worry here. This is because instead of display all resources, the filter is set to the current project resources. And you see this is blank. The reason behind this is because we have not created any resources for our project yet in the resources dictionary. Now, before we create any resources, we are going to create the headers for all these resources type. I will create the main header as Arba Head Office Building Project, and the subheader I will create labor resources, non-labor resources, and material resources types, so that whatever resources we will create, we can put within these headers accordingly, and this way we'll be able to view and find these resources quickly and easily as needed. Now let me right click anywhere in the resources window and click on add option here. It is giving me the information. In order to add a resource, the filter will be changed to display all resources. I will click on OK button. Now you see it is displaying all the resources which are there by default created in the Oracle Primavera P6 already. And here we have a new entry called new resource. In the ID, since I'm going to create my main header, so I will type ID as AHO, and in the resource name I will double click in the cell and will type Arba Head Office Building Project Resources. Okay, then you see in the move toolbar on the right side we have the different arrows there that I can use to move the position of my resource as needed. Now what I will do is I will click on move left icon in the move toolbar, and you see it has moved one step left in the hierarchy. I will click on this icon move left once more. Now it has moved in the extreme left position. After this I will use the move up icon in the move toolbar to move it at the top. Okay, so we have created our header already with the resource ID AHO, and the resource name is Arba Head Office Building Project Resources. Now let me right click here on Arba Head Office Building Project Resources and click on add. Now you see we have a new entry there. Okay, now the first resource that we are going to add here is Maria Thomas, and she is the project manager. So in the resource ID I will type MT, and in the resource name I will double click and type here Maria Thomas. Okay, then I will click on General tab in the resource details form below. As you can see here, the same details we have under resource ID in the General tab, which is MT. Then the resource name is Maria Thomas. We can type the employee ID if required. Then we can type the title of the resource which is project manager. Similarly, we can type the email address and the office phone number if needed. Then the next thing we are going to do is we are going to click on the details tab here in the resources details form. Now from the top, as you can see in the details tab, we have resource type. Remember, we said that we have three types of resources in our project, that are labor, non-labor, and material resources. Labor resources are human beings or the people that are working on the project to complete the work on the project activities. Then we have non-labor resources. Non-labor resources are basically the equipment used in the project, such as cranes, excavators, forklifters, etc. Then the third resources type is material resources. Material resources are basically consumable items or raw materials that is used in the project. We can take the example, for example, it can be sand, cement, or other supplies that are required in the project. Okay, and the next we have the currency and overtime. Under currency, we can display the type of currency we want. At present, it is US dollar, so I will leave as it is. But if you want, you can click on browse button here and can change the type of currency you want, and can click on select button to select the required currency as needed in the select currency window. Since I want to keep the US dollar as my default currency here in the resources detail form, so I will keep as it is. I will click on cross button to close this window. Okay, now in the resource type, I will keep it as labor, radio button selected. Okay, now on the right side under profile in the calendar, we have the two options here. We can browse the calendar from our existing calendars list. For example, if I click on browse button here, it will open up the select resource calendar window. I will leave the default calendar which is selected there already, so I will close this window. But if you want to have a different calendar, that you can select the different calendar and can assign it by clicking on the select button in the right side in the select resource calendar window. So I'm going to close this now. The next thing is how many resources we are required per day in our project. Since we want to have only one project manager in our project, so I will change this to 1 per day. Okay, now I forgot to explain the create personal calendar. This button is used to create the personal calendar if you want, but I'm not going to create the new calendar here, so I will close this window. Okay, the next tab we are going to click in the resources detail form is units and prices. In the units and prices, we have maximum units per time. That means how many maximum project manager will lead in our project. We are not going to have more than one project manager, so I will change it to 1 per day. And then we have standard rate here. That means how much this project manager will earn on daily basis. I will change to, for example, our project manager is earning 600 per day. Okay, now then I will visit the roles tab to assign the roles, to role to our resource called Maria Thomas we have just created. I will click on assign button to assign the role. Now you see the assign roles window is opened in front of us. Remember, we have created the 5 roles already in our previous lesson, that are design architect, project manager, construction supervisor, procurement supervisor, and electrical mechanical supervisor. What I will do is, in this case, I need to assign the role of a project manager. So I will click on this role called project manager and will click on assign button on the right side. Now I will close this assign roles window by clicking on this red cross sign here in the upper right corner. Now you see in the roles tab, the role is already appeared and assigned to the Maria Thomas which is a project manager. So this is how we have created our first resource in the resource dictionary. Now before we create another resource, I need to correct my header, which is Arba. Okay, fine, now it is correct. Now let me create the second resource, which is Jacob Bolton. So what I will do is I will right mouse click here in the resources window and we'll click on add button here. Now you see we have another row for our new resource here. I will click on general. In the resource ID, I will type JB, and in the resource name, I'm going to type Jacob Bolton. Of course, you can type the employee ID, title, email address, and office phone, etc. as needed. Then the next important thing I need to do is I will click on details here. Since this is a labor resource, so the resource type I will select, or in fact, it is already selected there, labor. I will leave labor radio button selected. Currency is the same. Then, of course, I'm going to use the default calendar for this resource. But since we are going to have one design architect in our project, so I will change the default units per time to 1 per day. Then 1 per day. Okay. Then I will click on units and prices tab. Here, the maximum design architects we need in our project is 1 only. So I will modify this field to 1 per day. So that means we are going to have only one design architect in our project. Then the design architect is going to earn $500 per day. And then I will click on roles tab here and click on assign, and will assign the design architect role by clicking on assign button in the right side. And this way, you see, we have already assigned the design architect role to the Jacob Bolton. Okay, on the right side, if you observe here, we have arrow showing move left icon. I will click on this, and this way we have moved our resources called Jacob Bolton in the left one step. So these arrows are basically you can use to move up or down your resources, move up or down, left and right, whatever way you want to build your resources hierarchy. Now, the next resource we are going to add in our resources dictionary is Michael Lim, who is our construction supervisor. And this time I'm going to use the add button in the edit toolbar in the upper right corner. So I will click on add. It will start the new resource wizard. In the resource ID, I will type ML. Resource name, I'm going to type Michael Lim, and then I will click next. Of course, the resource type is labor, so I will leave this option selected and will click on next button. Now, since this resource is going to earn $400, so I will type here 400. Then default units per time, we are going to have 3 construction supervisor in our project. So I will change it to 3 per day, and we are not going to have more than 3 construction supervisor in our projects. So I will put 3 per day under maximum units per time. Now I'll click on next button here. I'll type the office phone number and email address. Then I'll click on next. I will assign the role to Michael Lim, which is by clicking on assign button here. So let me click on construction supervisor and click on assign button to assign the role to Michael Lim. Now I will close the assign roles window. Then I will select finish to close the new resource wizard. And you see, since this is already created under Jacob Bolton, so I need to move left, one step left in the hierarchy. So I will click on move left button or move left icon in the move toolbar, and now it is correct. Let me add the fourth resource, and this time I'm going to press insert button from my keyboard, and you see it has added another resource. We need to modify the resource ID as BJ. Our resource name is Brian Johnson. Okay, then I'm going to click on General tab. Of course, you can type the other details such as employee ID, title, email address, etc. if required. Then the next important part we need to click on is Details tab in the resources details form. We'll leave the labor radio button selected under resource type, and of course we will leave the default calendar as it is, and we are not going to create the new calendar here. Then the next thing we are going to do is to click on Units and Prices tab. I need to click on Details, and I need to change the default units per time. We are going to have one procurement supervisor only, so I will change it to 1 per day. And then now I will click on Units and Prices tab. Here the maximum units per time 1 only, since the maximum we are going to have 1 per day in our project. We are not going to have more than 1 procurement supervisor here. And our procurement supervisor is going to earn 400 per day. Okay, so we have added our fourth resource, which is Brian Johnson's. But before I move on to our next resource, I need to click on roles and need to assign the roles by clicking on Assign button here. Brian Johnson is our procurement supervisor, so I will click on Procurement Supervisor role in the list and click on Assign button here. Okay, so the role Procurement Supervisor has been assigned to the Brian Johnson as we needed. I have to move this resource one step in the left side, so I will click on Move Left button here in the Move toolbar. Now let me create the last resource for our project. Let me right click here and add another resource. The resource ID is EW and resource name is Elvin Wu. Okay, then after that I will click on Details. Resource type is labor resource, so I will leave this option as it is. Okay, default calendar is selected there. I'm not going to create a personal calendar separately for this resource, but the default units I will change this to 1 per day. Okay, then I will click on Units and Prices, and here the maximum electrical and mechanical supervisor we need for our project are 2. So I will change it to maximum units per time to 2. Okay, now how much this electrical and mechanical supervisor is going to earn on our project? That is 400 per day. So as I said, we will have 1 electrical and mechanical supervisor per day, but we will not exceed more than 2 on our project. Let me assign the roles now by clicking on Roles tab. Then let me click on Assign, and I will select the electrical and mechanical supervisor role by clicking on Assign button here on the right side. I will click on Move Left icon in the Move toolbar on the right. And you see here all our labor resources are created here as we needed. We have Project Manager, and the name of the project manager is Maria Thomas. Then we have Jacob Bolton, and he is Design Architect. Third resource is called Michael Lim, and he is the Construction Supervisor. We need 3 construction supervisors every day. Then we have Brian Johnson, who is our Procurement Supervisor. We need to have maximum 2 procurement supervisors, but at present we are going to use 1 per day. Okay, now before we proceed further, I need to create the subheaders so that I can classify my resources easily. So I will click on Arba Hatavis building project resources, and right click here and click on add to add another header, which is, I will say, non-labor resources. So in the resource name, I will type non-labor resources. Okay, I need to create another one. So I will click on the main header, ARBA Head Office Building Project Resources. Right click and click on add. In the resource ID, I will type mat, since these are our material resources. So I will type mat, and resources name is, I will say, let's say it is material resources. Let me change the resource ID to nlab. Finally, we need to create another header called labor resources. I will right click and click on add option here. In the ID, I will type lab, and in the name, I will type labor resources. Okay. Now, since we have created 5 labor resources already, so I need to move these labor resources under the labor resources heading. Now, let me move our 5 resources exactly under the labor resources by clicking on move up button. Then I will click on Jacob Bolton and use the move up button on the right side. Okay. Then Michael Lynn, I will move up. Similarly, Brian Johnson and Elvin Wu. Okay, so all our resources are moved exactly under our labor resources. Now, what I'm going to do is I will click on our first resource, and I will click on move right icon in the move toolbar, and you see it has moved right one step in the hierarchy. The similar thing I will do for the Jacob Bolton. I will click on move right button. Then I will click on Michael Lynn, similarly Brian Johnson, and the last is Elvin Wu. I will move it one step right by clicking on move right icon in the move toolbar. Okay, so now all our labor resources have been moved under the labor resources header. And next we are going to create the non-labor resources. Now, in order to create the non-labor resources, let me click on non-labor resources header. And after this, I will click on add button in the edit toolbar. It will start the new resources wizard. In the resource ID, let me type CN, and in resource name, I will type crane. After I will click on next. Resource type, I will select non-labor. Then I will click next. The price per unit for the crane is 300 per day, and the default units per time is we need the 2 cranes per day. Okay, for the maximum units per time, let's say we are not going to exceed the 2 cranes per day for our project, so I will leave it as 2 cranes per day and click next. Office phone number, email address, no need. Then I will click next again. No need to assign the roles to our non-labor resources, so I will click next. I will keep the default calendar selected, so I will leave as it is. Click next and next again. Let's leave the auto compute actuals for this resource selected and click next. Okay, we have got this message like congratulations, we have just added a new resource. I will click on finish button here. So we have added our first non-labor resource under the non-labor resources header in the resources dictionary. Okay, let me click on add button again. Now in the resource ID, I will type EX. Resource name is excavator, and I will click on next. Non-labor resource type is selected already. I will click next. Okay, now this resource called excavator is going to cost us $300 per day. So I will type under price per unit 300 per day for a single resource. Now we need 3 excavators for our project. So I will type 3. Then we don't need more than 3 excavators for our project. So I will leave this 3 per day. I'll click next. Okay, next again. No need to assign roles. Click next. Okay, select an existing calendar and click next. Okay, next again. Auto compute actual is selected there by default. I will click next and we'll click on finish, and we have added the second non-labor resource for our project already. Our third non-labor resource is forklifter, and let me add this resource by clicking on non-labor resources header and right click here, click on add. Now in the resource ID I can type FL, and resource name I will type forklifter, and then I will double click resource type and change it to non-labor. After this I will come down in the details tab here. Non-labor is selected there already. Okay, I will leave the default calendar selected. Then I will change the default units per time to 1 forklifter per day. Then I will click on units and prices tab in the resources detailed form, and the maximum we are going to need is 1 forklifter only, so I will change this to 1 per day, and this forklifter is going to charge us $200 per day. $200 per day. Now let me quickly add our next non-labor resource, which is concrete mixer, and let me right click and click on add option here. In the resource ID let me type CX, and in the resources name I will type concrete mixer. Okay, it is non-labor resource. Okay, let me click on details tab, and here in the default units per time I will type 4 per day, since we are going to need 4 concrete mixers per day on our project. Okay, after this I will click on units and prices, and the maximum units per time, I mean the maximum units that we are going to use for our project are, let's say, 10 per day. Now the concrete mixer is going to charge us $300 per day. Okay, so you see we have finished adding our non-labor resources in the resources dictionary now. Now let me arrange the non-labor resources properly under the non-labor resources header. I will move this concrete mixer one step left by clicking on the move left icon in the move toolbar, and similarly I will change the excavator position as well. Okay, now I will click on non-labor resources and I will click one step up. Okay, now we have finished adding our non-labor resources. Now let's add the material resources that are required for our project. Now another key point to remember here, that in the details tab, the default units per time option, this means how many resources we need in a single day. While on the other hand, in the units and prices tab, the maximum units per time means that how many resources are available to work on the project activities. I mean, how many maximum resources are available to work on the project. And the standard rate, of course, it means that how much the resources type are going to cost us on hourly or daily basis as needed. Now you see, adding material resources is very easy. I will click on material resources header and right click here, click on add. In the resource ID I will type SN. Resource name I'm going to add, let's say, sand. Now I will click on details tab below. Since this resource type is material, I will click on material radio button. Changing the resource type to material will remove all the role assignments to this resource. I will click yes. And the units of measure, I will click on browse button here. Sand is normally measured in tons, so I will select this. Now my units are measured for sand is tons. Now the default units per time, this is what we are going to need in a single day. Let's say we are going to need 700 tons sand daily. Then I will click on units and prices, and let's say I'm going to add the maximum that is required, 700 daily, and it is going to cost us $200 per ton. Now let me click on material resources header again, and let me create my second material resource by clicking on add option. This time I'm going to create the cement. The resource ID is, let's say, CM. Resource name is cement. Now I'll click on details tab here. We'll select the resource type as material. I will click yes here. Now click on browse button here to select the units of measure for our cement resource type. I will click on 40 kg per one pack and click select. In fact, the units of measure for the cement is packs. So let's say I need 500 packs per day. Then I will leave the calendar as it is, and I will click on units and prices tab. Now the maximum I need is 750 per day. Now each pack is going to cost us $20, for example. Now you see, this is how we can add the material resources as needed in our project. But before we proceed further, please note that we can always create the units of measure as per our own project requirements if we don't find the units in the list here in the select unit of measure window. We can do that by clicking on admin menu from the top. Then we'll select an admin categories. Now here on the left side, I will click on units of measure. Then I will click on add. In the add, for example, I want to put the unit as square feet. Okay. And under unit name, I will type square feet, for example. Then I will click close. Now you see, if I click on browse button under units of measure now, so you will see the new units there called square feet. So this is how you can add the new unit of measure if needed. I will click on cross button here to close the window. Sorry, I forgot to change the resources type for our material resources and non-labor resources headers. So for the non-labor resources, I will click on resource types and change it to non-labor. Similarly, I will click on material resources header and under resources type, change it to material resource type. I will simply click yes here. Now another thing, if you have observed here in the resources window, the material resources are represented by a small icon looking like bricks, and then the non-labor resources, we have two wheels or mechanical wheels like icon here for the non-labor resources, and while on the other hand the labor resources are represented by an icon similar like a human being. So in short, we can easily classify and identify the resources type quickly by looking at the icons as well. We can easily classify and can easily find out the resources type we are dealing with. Let me quickly recap what we have learned in this particular lesson. Remember, we have three types of resources. We have labor resources type, non-labor, and material resources. We can add the resources to the resources dictionary by right click, and we can click the add option to add a new resource. Alternatively, we can use the add icon in the edit toolbar from the right side, and also we can use the insert key from our keyboard to add any particular resource type we needed. And once a resource is added, we can modify the details in the journal tab down below in the resources detail form here. We can modify the resources ID, resources name as needed. Important to remember here that in the details tab, we can always modify the calendar if needed. Also, under default units per time, we mention the default number of resources required on our project on daily basis. Then in the units and prices tab, we can mention the maximum resources available on daily basis. I mean the maximum resources that can be made available to work on our project. Under standard rate, we are mentioning the cost of that particular resource on daily or hourly basis as needed. In other words, standard rate means that how much is being earned by a certain resource on a project on daily or hourly basis. Also, please note that we can always add the units of measure by clicking on admin, and then we'll click on admin categories here. On the left side there we can use the units of measure tab and can add the new units of measurement or new units of measure by clicking the add button as needed. Okay, so then goodbye, and I see you in our next class.